So we're at page 159, starting part 9, the 10 states of God. The pages of this chapter are built around the diagram depicting the 10 states of God. This diagram has been given by Meher Baba himself. It is a gem from the fathomless treasure of his supreme gnosis. The spiritual terms of this diagram have been linked up with the most generally accepted Sufi, Vedantic, and Christian mystical equivalents. If we were to take a bird's eye view of this diagram, we should find that it depicts what is really the downward journey of the oversoul to the lowest point of devolution as man, insan jivatma, and its upward journey again through the unfolding planes of consciousness, back to the original source, first as the divinely absorbed Majzub-e-Kamil, and culminating finally in the perfect man, Insan-e-Kamil, or Shiv Atma. The 10 different states of God are principal stages on this journey, a journey in which unconscious God becomes conscious man in order to become conscious God. Although these states of God are depicted as apparently distinct from one another, they are in effect 10 aspects of the one God who is and will always remain one. The descent and ascent of the oversoul is in imagination only. And with the cessation of imagination comes the realization with full consciousness for the individual soul that God alone exists, and that anything and everything else which appears to exist is but his shadow. Meher Baba's gnosis upholds without equivocation both the theory of identityism, Wadat ul Wujud, and the theory of Advaitism. In the chart, The 10 States of God by Meher Baba, it is made clear that it is God alone who plays the different roles, real and imaginary. The beginning is God, and the end is God. The intermediary stages cannot but be God. The spiritual dictum of Islamic theology is Huwal Awal, Huwal Akhir, Huwal Zahir, Huwal Batin. He is the first, he is the last, he is the external, he is the internal. Maulana Shabistari in Gulshan-e-Raz says, Gar andar amad aval ham bidar shud. Agar chi dar ma'ad az dar bidar shud. The translation is, he returns to the door from which he first came out, although in his journey he went from door to door. We shall now try to describe concisely each one of these 10 states of God as explained by Meher Baba. Marian, could you please read for us?
State 1. God in the beyond state. This state of God is so transcendent that nothing can really be conceived of it. It is utterly pure and immaculate and has no tinge of otherness. It is the hidden of all hidden knowledge and the internal of all internal realities. It is beyond all words, and so it cannot be adequately described. It is neither finite nor infinite, neither attributeless nor with attributes. In this domain, the wings of thought, inference, discrimination, and understanding are limp and useless. Bikayal dar naganjad tu kiyali kavud marajan zijahat buvad mubara mavalab bihik suyash. Hafiz quote. Translated, he cannot be grasped by the mind. Therefore, do not exert yourself to understand him. He is free of all directions. Therefore, do not try to seek him anywhere. Meher Baba says that when one who has realized this state of God tries to describe it to others, this act results in a description not of the first, but of the second state of God, God in the beyond state. It is the eternity of all eternities, Azul ul Azal, because no eternity can be conceived of to precede or to follow it. Here, all indications are blotted out. Munkata ul Izharat. Since no other thing exists that can be pointed out or referred to. This pure essence, Zat al-Bat, is not aware of anything, even of itself. This state has been referred to by the Sufis as Wara ul Wara, the beyond state of God. Vedanta calls it Paratpar Parabrahma. This is the state in which God is neither nirguna, attributeless, nor saguna, with attributes. Neither nirakar, formless, nor sakar, with forms. Of all the principal 10 states of God, the first and the most original state is the beyond state of God. When there were no other states of God in the beyond the beginning of the beginning, only the most original infinite state of God, that is, God is state, prevailed as the beyond state of God. in the infinitude of this beyond state of God, only the infinity of infinitude is manifest as the unbounded, absolute, infinite, divine vacuum. And all other states, attributes, and aspects of God, including infinite consciousness and infinite unconsciousness, are all latent as the nothing in that infinitude of the unbounded, absolute, infinite, divine vacuum, as the everything. Everything also includes the nothing. Thus, the most original, beyond state of God is that state where one can only say, God is eternally. And that in this most original state, God is neither infinitely nor finitely conscious nor unconscious of self or of his own state of infinitude. In this state, God is neither conscious nor unconscious of illusion or reality. State 2, God in the beyond state. We have already stated that the beyond state of God can never be adequately described. God-realized beings, when they try to describe the beyond state, succeed only in describing the beyond state of God, which is the Allah of Sufis, the Ahura Mazda of Zoroastrians, the Paramatma of Vedantists, God the Father of Christians, and the Oversoul of some philosophers. God in the beyond state is absolute, unlimited, and infinite, the one without a second. Meher Baba, while explaining this second state of God, stressed that fundamentally, state 2 is in no way different from state 1 of God. The substates A, B, and C of state 2 of God are what create the difference. How, when, and where the difference came into being is described as follows from the explanations of Meher Baba. At the instant when the latent, original, infinite whim of the infinite God to know himself, who am I, is about to surge in the unbounded uniformity of the unbounded, absolute, infinite, divine vacuum of the most original, beyond state of God. The very prospect of this infinite urge to know, prompting the eternally tranquil poise of God in the unbounded, absolute, infinite divine vacuum, becomes inconceivable.
Thanks, Marion. Ernie, please.
But the fact of the insurge of the infinite whim and its very inconceivability spontaneously brings into being another aspect of God's state, other than the most original beyond state of unbounded, absolute, infinite, divine vacuum, where there is neither prospect of aspect nor attribute, neither the infinite or finite consciousness nor the infinite or finite unconsciousness, and where, except for the infinity of God, which is eternally manifest, every other thing is latent, including the infinite whim and the consequent infinite urge to know. Thus it is that the very inconceivability of the prospect of the infinite whim, surging in the beyond state, automatically unfolds the prospectiveness, which is also latent in the infinite state. And this manifestation of prospectiveness bestows upon the most original beyond state of God the prospect of an infinite aspect different from that of the most original and eternal state. The second state of God, accordingly, comes into being only as another infinite aspect of the most original first state. This second state of the 10 principal states of God is called the original beyond state of God. It is to be heeded well that this original second state of God, denoted in the chart as Roman numeral 2 or Roman numeral II, and termed God in beyond state, is in no way to be taken as a state of God altogether, other than the most original first state of God, denoted in the chart as Roman numeral I, and termed God in beyond state. The only difference between state 1 and state 2 of God is that state 1 is of unbounded, absolute, infinite, divine vacuum, where even the remotest prospect of the insurge of the infinite whim is inconceivable. Therefore, only at the instant when the original infinite whim insurges in the infinitude of the God is state could infinite God conceive the infinite original urge to know as, who am I? That is only when the aspectless state 1 of God in beyond gets the aspect of state 2 of God in beyond. Par Brahma thus gets the infinite aspect of Paramatma. It is also to be noted very carefully that the beyond state marked in the chart as 2 is fundamentally the same as the beyond state of God marked in the chart as 1. But in the chart, these two states, state 1 and state 2, are depicted separately, because even though state 2 of God in beyond state is the same original state of God, yet it is not the most original state of God, which is the beyond state. This necessarily follows because God could conceive the infinite insurge of the infinite original whim and could get the infinite original impulse of the infinite original urge to know as, who am I? Only in state 2, when God eternally in state 1 assumes the infinite original aspect of state 2 within his own eternal state 1, which is the most original beyond state. To be more explicit, in both these states of God, states 1 and 2, except for the eternally manifest infinity of the eternal infinitude of God, as the unbounded, absolute, infinite divine vacuum, all attributes, all aspects, all states, infinite and most finite consciousness and unconsciousness of God, including God's own infinite trio nature of power, knowledge, and bliss, and all other things are all latent in the unbounded, absolute, infinite divine vacuum. All this that is latent in the infinitude could only have the scope of manifestation in state 2 of God, which may be said to differ from state 1 only in this respect, of having this infinite scope of manifestation of all that is infinitely and most finitely latent as the nothing in the infinitude of God as the everything. Consequently, the infinite original whim of God, when it once surged, had the feasibility of surging only in state 2 of God. And when it surged, it did so uniformly in the infinitude of God. But when the whim surged, the insurge of this whim could never be experienced by God and is infinitely most independent beyond state 1. It was experienced by God eternally in the most original beyond state, only through the infinite aspect of his state 2 is God in the beyond state. Hence, the infinite insurge of the infinite original whim and its consequent infinite repercussions are in reality affected in the state 2 of God in the beyond state. At the instant when the infinite original whim surged, and God had the infinite original urge to know, as who am I? The infinite uniformity of the infinite insurge of the whim spontaneously made manifest both the latent infinite consciousness and the latent infinite unconsciousness of God simultaneously in the original beyond state of God, who is nevertheless eternally in the most original beyond state.
Thanks, Ern. Mahu, please.
This spontaneous manifestation of the latent infinite consciousness and infinite unconsciousness simultaneously is beyond the grasp of human intellect to understand and digest. It is indeed a paradox of the realm of reality, and it defeats all human understanding. How could God gain spontaneously his own infinite consciousness and his infinite unconsciousness simultaneously? Meher Baba, while explaining this, declared that this is a fact, and it is of the realm of reality, but it can never be understood or grasped by the mind. It is only to be realized on realizing the reality. At the same time, in order that we may get at least some concept of the fact affected in reality, and that we may not take it as a mere paradoxical mystery, Meher Baba made us understand this apparent paradox through the example of a child in a mother's womb. When the mother conceives the child, when the mother conceives, the child is under development in the mother's womb. And as soon as the development reaches a stage when, along with other developments, the eyes of the child are fully molded, the child gains the faculties of seeing and not seeing simultaneously. Irrespective of whether the child after birth sees or does not see, the very fact that the eyes have been molded in the womb of his mother gives to the child the dual aspect of his own eyes. In the eyes, as soon as they are developed, the faculties of seeing and not seeing are simultaneously contained. When the child opens his eyes, he will see, and when he closes his eyes, he will not see. But the fact still holds good, and that no sooner were the eyes developed than there was contained in them the dual faculty of seeing and not seeing simultaneously. Similarly, with the insert of the original infinite whim in God, both the infinite consciousness and unconsciousness latent in God were manifested simultaneously, which to the limited mind appears paradoxical. Thus, God, in his most original state, one of the beyond gained spontaneously through his original state, two of the beyond, his own infinitely unconscious state and his own infinitely conscious state simultaneously, depicted in the chart as states A and B respectively. Consequently, on the one hand, with the spontaneous manifestation of infinite unconsciousness, God in his infinite unconscious beyond state shows as A in the chart, eternally remains not only infinitely unconscious of his own eternal infinite existence, as in the most original beyond state of infinitude absolute, but he also eternally remains infinitely unconscious of his own begotten infinite original beyond state shown in the chart as 2. On the other hand, simultaneously with the spontaneous manifestation of infinite consciousness, God in his infinite conscious beyond state, marked in the chart as B, eternally becomes not only infinitely conscious of his own eternal infinite existence, as in the most original beyond state of infinitude absolute, but he also becomes most obviously infinitely conscious of his own begotten infinite original beyond state shown in the chart as 2. In other words, only in the beyond state of God, marked in the chart as a state 2, God spontaneously, with the insurge of the infinite original whim, simultaneously begets his eternal, infinite, unconscious state, marked as substate A, and his eternal, infinite, conscious state, marked as substate B. Substate A is of God in beyond state, marked as state 2. This substate A is of divine infinite unconsciousness of God's own infinite power, infinite knowledge, and infinite bliss. God in this substate A neither consciously experiences his own trio nature of infinite power, knowledge, and bliss, nor uses them. Substate B is also of God in beyond state, marked as a state 2. This substate B is attributeless and formless, but is of highest divine consciousness of God's own infinite trio nature of infinite power, knowledge, and bliss. God in this substate B consciously experiences his own infinite power, infinite knowledge, and infinite bliss, but he does not use them. He is conscious of his reality, but is unconscious of illusion.
Thanks, Mahu. In Vedantic terminology, it is thus that the state 1 of Paratpar Parabrahma begets the state 2 of Paramatma. And in this state 2, God as Paramatma is eternally unconscious and simultaneously eternally conscious of his own most original state of Paratpar Parabrahma. This infinite dual aspect of the Paramatma state is pointed out in the chart as state A and state B, respectively. It naturally follows, therefore, that the eternal unconscious state of Paramatma, marked A, in the eternal original beyond state, marked 2, eternally aspires to attain the eternal conscious state of Paramatma, marked B, which is the second of the dual infinite aspects of the original beyond God state, Paramatma, marked 2. Consequently, the divine goal is that the unconscious state of God in A should attain the conscious reality of the conscious state of God in B. In short, when state A consciously realizes state B, the divine goal is achieved, or pardon me, the divine goal is attained. For state A to realize consciously state B, there is no other alternative but that state A must gradually experience transmutation into state B and eventually become state B in all respects consciously. This gradual transmutation of the unconscious infinite state of God into the conscious infinite state is depicted through states 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 as different states of God in the chart of the 10 states of God. In state 8, state A of God becomes fully conscious of state B. In this state 8, the unconscious infinite state A of God not only gains the highest divine consciousness of state B, but God becomes divinely absorbed in the reality of his own infinite conscious state, and so realizes his eternal identity with the infinite conscious state B of God. Marian, could you continue reading, please?
Yes. If God, divinely absorbed, as in state 8, recovers and maintains normal consciousness of the mental, subtle, and gross spheres through his mental, subtle, and gross aspects as an embodiment of a perfect human being, then state 9 at the divine junction between states 8 and 10 is attained. After this 9th state, the 10th state of God is depicted in the chart and connected with the God state C. This 10th state of God is the state of God qualitied and manifest in the human form of a perfect master. In state 10, God consciously experiences his own trio nature of infinite power, infinite knowledge, and infinite bliss, and also uses them through the divine office of God, state 10, marked in the chart as C. It is also to be well noted that God, in the infinite unconscious state A, is neither nirguna, attributeless, nirakar, formless, nor saguna, with attributes, sakar, with form. But state B is of nirguna nirakar, attributeless and formless, and state C, which is also of the original beyond God state, is of saguna sakar, with attributes and form. It is that highest state of man God, where God is infinitely conscious of both reality and illusion. State 3, God as emanator, sustainer, and dissolver. In this state, God brings into play his three principal attributes, sifat, of emanating, sustaining, and dissolving. This three-in-one state corresponds to the trinity of Vedanta: Brahma, creator; Vishnu, preserver; and Mahesh, destroyer. The Sufi synonyms of which are the terms Afridgar, Parvardigar, and Fanakar. The three attributes of God are expressed through the three archangels: Israfil, the angel who creates life; Michael, the angel who sustains life; and Israel, the angel who destroys life. The triple attributes of state 3 of God were latent in the most original state 1 of God. These simultaneously unfolded themselves spontaneously at that instant when the original infinite whim surged in God, and when he conceived in his state 2 the infinite urge to know himself as, who am I? At that instant of the insurge of the infinite whim, God in his state 2 gained simultaneously the infinite dual aspects of being infinitely unconscious as in his state A, and at the same time of being infinitely conscious as in his state B. Nevertheless, the infinite original urge to know himself obviously persists still in God's state A, which is yet infinitely unconscious of himself. The infinite urge to know himself persisting in this infinitely unconscious state A of God made possible the manifestations of all the qualities and aspects of God latent as the nothing in the infinitude of the most original state 1 of God as the everything. But all that is latent as the nothing in the everything could be possibly conceived as latent in the beyond state 2 of God only. Wherefore, all that is latent in the beyond state of God is gradually unfolded, propelled by the infinite urge, and is spontaneously made to manifest as all that is of the nothing. Hence, the nothingness of the nothing that is manifested is the creation. And this creation springs forth out of the infinite urge to know in the infinite unconscious state A of God. Consequently, it is only natural that the infinite unconscious state A of God gains the first attribute as emanator of the three infinite attributes: God the creator, God the preserver, and God the dissolver or destroyer. For God to have gained the attribute of emanator, he obviously becomes the creator of creation, as in his state 3. It then follows most naturally that when God creates, he must spontaneously also sustain what he creates. He then obviously becomes also the preserver of creation, as in his state 3. And in the very act of preserving what is created, God also simultaneously establishes the inevitable dissolution or destruction of creation. Preservation would be meaningless if dissolution or destruction were not anticipated. Accordingly, God obviously becomes also the dissolver or destroyer of creation, as in his state 3.
Thank you, Marian. Ernie, could you continue, please?
State 3 of God is that state in which God becomes the creator and simultaneously remains the sustainer or preserver and dissolver or destroyer of his own creation. At one and the same time, God thus becomes the creator, preserver, and destroyer in state 3. The infinite original whim that surged in God and the consequent infinite urge to know himself made manifest in God the infinite triple attributes of creator, preserver, and dissolver, with all the paraphernalia of the nothingness of the latent nothing. This nothingness literally is nothing, although it appears to exist through illusion, sometimes called Maya, as the creation. Mayor Baba has told us that there is no creation in the literal sense of the word. What we call creation is a manifestation of countless forms of the nothing. This nothing is really no thing, but it exists in its own field of illusion. It cannot be denied, but it is not beyond the everything, that is, God. Although the everything includes this nothing, the nothing never does and never can include or mean the everything. The Almighty alone is the everything, including the nothing. And before creation manifested itself, there was literally and absolutely no thing but the Almighty as the everything. Zat the Allah ki ar jav sab raposh the ik sot I sarmadi the nagain sab kamosh the da akav Mike Ana Saki Dana Vaj Monash the Kayi Not Dahar Kia Ru Aman Bahash the Zindag Jab Muskuru Ha Kesa K Samni Musaf Aljar. Translation: the existence of Allah alone was, in all manifestations, were latent within. One eternal sound prevailed, and all musical notes were dormant therein. Only the tavern was there, no cupbearers and wine drinkers. The gross universe was out of the question. Even the angelic world was not in existence. When, with the divine command, be, life smilingly sprang up. The Almighty alone existed, but he was only latently conscious, and hence he did not know himself. And in the same way that consciousness was latent in him, so also creation was latent in him. The difference between the latent and the manifest creation may be compared to that between a seed and a tree. But whether seed or tree, latent or manifest, creation is always no thing, because it is the latent nothing that is manifested as the nothingness. All that is latent as the nothing in the beyond state too of the infinitude of God as the everything is expressed and manifested through a most finite point in the infinitude of God. This point is called the creation point, or the Om state. Asterisk. See also Francis Brabazon, Stay with God. Through this point, creation has been precipitated. This creation point was also latent in the most original state one of God, in the beyond state. The process of emanating, sustaining, and dissolving, which is constantly and uniformly going on, may be illustrated by an analogy. Let us imagine that a human body is God. The human body, sleeping with eyes shut, may then be compared to the beyond state of God as state 2A. The very first moment of opening the eyes may be compared to the state of God as creator. The subsequent condition of remaining awake may be compared to the state of God as sustainer, and going back to sleep again with eyes shut may be compared to the state of God as dissolver. Thus, God is the creator, sustainer, and dissolver, all three in one, at one and the same time.
Thanks, Ernie. So next time we'll continue with state 4. Let me just back up to the chart so listeners can look at it if they wish.